All right, welcome to this session. It's called Data Science for Good. What we'll do today is do some quick intros, a little bit about myself, talk about why would we use data science for interfaith, what do those two topics have in common. We'll talk a little bit about a learning approach, and then we're going to go right into a workshop. So this is going to be an interactive session. So if you have a laptop and you have internet connection, I would suggest you pop those open so you can try to follow along a little bit. And while I'm speaking, there's two links that are available. So one is to the data set, and one is to this tool we're going to use called Google Colab. And so as I'm speaking, if you want to go ahead and open up those URLs and take a look while we're doing the rest of the lecture portion. So a little bit about myself. My name is Khuram Zaman. I'm the CEO of a company called Fifth Tribe. We're a software development firm and product design firm based out of Washington, D.C. I'm also an adjunct professor at Georgetown University, where I teach a class called Launching Entrepreneurial Ventures. My background is actually not in tech. I did political science and philosophy. As somebody with South Asian background, my parents gave me two choices when I was in college. It was to be a doctor or be a lawyer. I ended up being a lawyer. And I graduated in 2008, which was really not a great time to graduate because the recession happened when I got back home. And I couldn't find a job. And so I ended up getting a job, whatever I could, with my buddies from college who were all basically doing tech. And one of my friends was starting a company called Fifth Tribe to build mobile apps, and I kind of joined along, and that's how my journey into tech began. So how I learned how to program, I watched a lot of YouTube videos. I took some classes on Udemy for $10. And basically built up my skill set there. And I'm sharing that just to kind of let you all know that this session it may seem a bit intimidating to talk about data science going from 0 to 1. But the point I'm trying to make is that you could start with literally no background in programming, no background in data science. You can start just building up a skill set. And what we want to accomplish from today's workshop is trying to get from 0 to 1. My email is khuram@fifthtribe.com, and you can also tweet at me at Zaman Digital. And I'm sharing my contact information because if hopefully you're inspired by this workshop, you'll probably want to learn more, have some questions, so you can reach out to me after this workshop. I don't have a background in programming, but as I was learning it by watching these YouTube videos, my company does these things called hackathons, where we would just spend a day or two, we get donuts and pizza, very unhealthy food, and try to learn something that we didn't know before, or try to build stuff. And a lot of our hackathons were kind of goofy. Like our first hackathon, we built a dating app to help people be a wingman or a wingwoman for their friend and try to find a date for them. And then we got a little bit more serious, and we got invited to a hackathon against ISIS in Abu Dhabi, and we ended up getting first place. So that was an interesting experience. And what was really cool about that was all the other people were programmers, and me and my friend were more building, doing product design. And so our apps look really nice. And so it really impressed the judges. And, it was one of those Wizard of Oz situations where it looks that's got this big thing and there's nothing behind it. So it was a really cool experience, and it inspired me to learn and get more, build up my technical acumen. And so I was learning Python through one of our hackathons, and I built a script to track how ISIS was operating on Twitter. And I made that into a data set and put it on a platform called Kaggle, which is a data science platform that data scientists all over the world use. It was bought by Google recently. And it went viral. My data set went viral on Kaggle, where it was the best performing data set for almost the entire year. And so I was really impressed with myself, and I told my developers, I was like, hey, my code, look how good it was. It went viral on Kaggle. My developers were like, bro, your code is from the 1960s. It's so bad. And then I was like, well, we put a man on the moon in the 1960s, so it can't be that bad. So it was a cool experience, and I kept kind of building up that skill set of how to look at Twitter to analyze things. And we did a few, like I mentioned, hackathon projects. So one was the ISIS data set. The second one was something called No Islamophobia. We did that over 2 days. And so we tracked an anti-Muslim sentiment on Twitter, and we just let it run. And it's been running since 2015 or 2016. It's still running, and we got 600,000 tweets. And we noticed that the anti-Muslim sentiment on Twitter was it started off in the United States, then it went to Europe, now it's in India, now it's in a little bit in China. And so it's this super simple project that we put together, and it's been kind of generating a lot of interesting information out of it. And so what I kind of concluded from those two hackathon projects was there's a lot of bad guys that are using religion and technology for bad purposes, right? So you think about, religion sometimes gets a bad rap, and technology does too. But those are really like neutral platforms, right? You can use religion for good, you can use it for evil. You can use technology for good, you can use it for evil. What I noticed though was that the bad guys were much more technically nuanced. So ISIS, for example, one of the reasons they were able to generate so much content, they were doing 200,000 tweets at their peak. They had built an app that basically retweets all their supporters' other tweets. And so they made themselves seem a lot larger and a lot bigger than they actually were. And so I was like, oh, this is really interesting. Like they're got this really advanced approach. And all the people that were trying to counter their messaging on Twitter were like really like old fashioned, like didn't really understand like some of what was kind of happening. And so their messages weren't like resonating and clicking. And so I was like, oh, there's, the good guys that are out there, we need to kind of step up our game and get a little bit more technical. So what we want to do with this workshop today is try to see how we as interfaith leaders can build up our data science skills to develop good digital strategies. And good digital strategy should be data-driven. Not exclusively data-driven, but like having an understanding of what's out there will make you more informed as a leader, help you find opportunities that you can build up for yourself and your organization. The problem with data is there's a lot of it, and it's really overwhelming. We're gonna look at 100 tweets, and you're going to see that there's like so much data that we can get out of it. And it's overwhelming. And so what data science allows us to do is to clean up our data, allows us to analyze it, allows us to make it actionable, right? We don't want to just spend all of our time collecting the data. We want to make it useful. And you don't need a large tech team or a budget to do this. You can do this by watching some YouTube videos and spending a little bit of time, frustrated, trying things out, tinkering, but you can get some pretty good analysis done. And what we want to do is use this data-driven approach to maximize our impact as leaders. So what we're going to do today is, it's mostly like an inspirational talk. Like I'm going to ask you to open up your laptops and start following along if you can. But really it's there to inspire you, to show you how easy it is to kind of get started. And to make this really complicated, seemingly hard topic and make it a little bit more accessible, right? And we're gonna look at Twitter as a potential interfaith outreach channel. There's lots of other ones out there, but Twitter is actually really easy to kind of get into and analyze. And instead of spraying and praying, like let's put our content on Twitter, hope somebody gives us a little retweet or a favorite, we wanna see if there's what's already out there and just observe. And so we're gonna code a little bit, we're going to analyze a little bit, and we're going to write up our recommendations and share them at the end. All right? And so we're going to learn by doing. If you want to do this, it's not really like too much of a lecture. You have to just try it out and get your hands dirty. And so you need a laptop, you need an internet access, and a Gmail account, and your thinking cap. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. All right? So let's consider this kind of like a mini hackathon. Like it's a 1-hour thing. We're not going to get that far. But we're here to learn. That's our main primary purpose, is just to get an understanding of what are some of these concepts. We're not going to get that far, and that's okay. Our goal is not to just try to feel like we can do all of this in one shot. The goal is let's just get from 0 to 1. And it's okay to fail. We might try this out. We might not get far. It might break. We might get some errors, and that's all right. And what we want to do is we want to iterate and improve upon our mistakes and get better with each iteration. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So this is the project overview. You've been hired by Interfaith Inc. It's a fake organization. I couldn't come up with a better name. To help develop a digital strategy for Twitter. They didn't know where to start, and they want to start with that platform. So you're going to check out about 100 tweets that use the hashtag Interfaith. And these are pulled last night. So these are very fresh. You could take a look at it, and we're going to try to see what information we can learn from it and what observations we have. And as we're looking through this data set of 100 tweets, I want you to just write down things that you're noticing and what are some of your observations. And at the end, what you should do is try to come up with a list of recommendations for Interfaith Inc. All right, so this is sort of the technical roadmap of what we're going to try to accomplish. So step 1 is we're going to set up Google Colab. Super easy, super simple. All right, and Google Colab is what we're going to be putting our code in. I'll talk a bit about it, but it's basically where the code's going to be running. Step 2, we're going to install some machine learning and data science libraries. Step 3, we're going to connect to Google Drive from our Google Colab. Step 4, we're going to open up a CSV of these tweets. Step 5, we're going to try to analyze some of that data, see what we're learning from it. Step 6, we're going to write down our observations. And then at the end, we're going to try to pull our recommendations together. All right? And all of this information is it's available on a Google Drive. Those are the links right there. And I'll put the presentation up as well. So step 1 is Google Colab setup, which is, what is Google Colab? Why are we using it? Google Colab is basically, it's a browser-based tool that lets you to write and run Python, which is a programming language. And it comes with all these libraries built into it. And really what it is like, it's one of those things that like, if you didn't have this before, you'd have to stop and install all these desktop applications, something called like Jupyter Notebook. But in order to use Jupyter Notebook, you gotta have Python, and then you gotta install this thing called Anaconda. And if you have the wrong version of Python, Anaconda won't work. You're gonna be pulling out your hair at 2 o'clock in the morning, watching YouTube videos, trying to figure out what's going on. So this is like the, like the version of when your parents tell you, when I was your age, I had to walk to school. This is this version where you just get to go in Google Colab and don't gotta trouble yourself with all this complicated installing software on your computer. You get to log in with Google Colab, and it works. So there's no software installation necessary. What's also really cool, it comes with tons of space. So it comes with about 120 gigabytes of disk space, and you can run a CPU off of it or a GPU off of it, which if you're doing data science stuff, GPUs are pretty useful. So it's cool, it's free, and you can log in, and it works with Google Drive. So what does that mean? You save lots of time, and you save a lot of money, and you can just skip all the software installation and just go right into it. So if you want to follow along, I've got the Google Colab notebook. It's opened, and the link is bit.ly/3PIOY. It's a capital O, capital Y, lowercase b, 8. So if you go to that URL, I'm going to go through the presentation, but you could the notebook is there, and you can kind of see the code itself. And guess what? You can copy paste it. This is a hackathon. There's no like intellectual property here. You can just take it, use it for your own. All right. And then if you want to open up the data set, which is the CSV, the link is https://bit.ly 3 capital Q capital L lowercase e capital C capital R capital L. Okay, so those are the two main things that you need to kind of follow along. And like I said, the presentation will be uploaded as well. So you go to colab.research.google.com, and then you log in with your Gmail account. You don't even have to create an account. You just log in with your Gmail account. And they're going to create a new notebook, and you're going to give it a file name, right? Pretty simple. We've all created documents in Google Drive. It functions like a Google Drive document. It's very similar. And what you'll notice that once you log in, there's a few different features. So for example, we see here it says File, Edit, View, Insert, Runtime Tools, Help, similar to most other Google documents. So File, you can rename your notebook. You can download it as a Python notebook. And then you see over here it says plus code and plus text. And what does that mean? Plus code means it's basically going to add a cell where you can write Python, and there's going to be a play button, and you're going to hit play, and it's going to run the code. All right. A text cell, what it does is you just put text in there, and you can like make it, format it, add like a title. You can do like bulleted lists. You can do numerical lists. It's just to kind of like put a little bit of text in there and describe what's going up. And then you can move your cells up and down if you want to rearrange it with these arrows next to them. All right. So once we've created a Google Colab notebook, we're going to install our libraries. And so the two libraries we're going to use today are really pandas and matplotlib. And we're not going to use Seaborn. But you type in import pandas as PD. What you're doing is you're giving a nickname to that library so that when you want to reference it, you just type in PD to access it, instead of having to type in 4 extra letters to get pandas. As programmers, we're pretty lazy, so we don't want to like spend time typing in keywords where they're not necessary. So that's an example of what we would do here. And then we open up this library called matplotlib.pyplot as PLT. Okay. The next thing that we're going to do is once we've installed our libraries, we're going to connect our Google Colab to our Google Drive. And so in order to do that, you need to give your Google Colab permission to do that. So by default, it doesn't let you just search your Google Drive. You got to tell it what to do. So again, you're going to add a code cell, and you're going to put a snippet here where it says from google.colab import drive. So it's opening up the Google Drive library. And then you're going to give it an instruction which says drive.mount, and then you're going to put in content/G drive. Okay. So once you hit that play button, you're going to get a little pop-up. It's going to say, are you really sure you want to give access to your Google Drive files, right? It's verifying that you want to give permission to do that. And you're going to give it permission. You're going to pick your Google account. I have multiple Google accounts, but if you have one, it'll just show up that one. And it's going to ask you for permission to do that. And once it's successful, you'll get a little green checkbox next to the cell. And then you'll also see, just as an FYI, like how much RAM and disk space you're using. So you can see mine, I'm not using that much. And you just keep track of, as you're doing these data science projects, like what's kind of in there. The reason mine looks really large is because I'm doing I was trying to make a deep fake of Donald Trump and a duck or something. And it was just like, it's a video thing. It takes a lot of space. So it's a random project you can do. All right. And then what you're going to do here is, you're going to read a CSV. So let's just take a look at this CSV right now. So this is a list of about 100 tweets. And, it's a little bit hard to read. Like, it's hard to really like analyze, like, what's going on here. There's some like numbers here. There's some random text. We got some, some applications, some URLs. There's what's happening in this entities thing. It's really ugly, right? So let's dive in and sort of see what that does. So we want to get the CSV into our Google Drive. So that link that you have for the data set, the first link, you're going to go to that, you download the CSV to your computer, and then you upload it into the Google Drive. And the Google Drive account has to be the same one that you're using for Google Colab, okay? Otherwise, you won't be able to recognize the file directory. And this is how once you've done that, you've got it in your Google Drive, you're gonna read it. So this is the path right here. You're gonna read it and turn it into a pandas data frame. So this sounds a little bit complicated, so let me break it down. So df is the name of the data frame we're gonna create, and then we're gonna do PD. Remember that pandas as PD. That's what that is, and it says read underscore CSV. So what it's saying is that through pandas, let's read a CSV. And then you have a file directory path over here. So you got content / Google Drive / my drive. I have it in a folder called data science shenanigans. If you put it in your main Google Drive, you'll skip that. And then you just put the file name. So the file name is tweets underscore interfaith underscore 88-2022.csv, okay? And once that's there, it'll read it, and you're gonna put print df, so it'll actually print the data frame, okay? And then now that we've done all that, we're gonna start analyzing, like all these different ways we can kind of look at the data. All right, so I'm gonna actually pull up the Google Colab over here, notebook. And so right at the top, what I typically do with the notebook is I write the context, like what is this data set we're looking at? What's in it? So I talk about how Twitter is the de facto public town square. It's used to organize and connect with communities, interfaith communities included. And what we want to do is look at tweets from various users and organizations that use the hashtag interfaith. And what is our objective? Like, what are we trying to accomplish? We want to look at opportunities for our organization to help promote better interfaith coordination. And then I have what's called a data dictionary. And this is so like if somebody's never seen your data set, you have all these like column names, they have no idea what it means. You should explain it up front, like what they're looking at. So here we see tweet ID, we see created, we see user, we see source, which is the application they use to post the tweet. How many people favorited that tweet? How many retweeted it? Where in the world are they from? Their geographical location, so their country is typically what's given. Coordinates are their longitude and latitude, right? So where did that tweet come from? And then you have the language of the tweet, and then you have entities, which entities means like it's like a huge dictionary basically that has lots of other kind of stuff inside of it. So here's where we import the libraries. So as you can see here, it says import pandas as PD, import matplotlib. There's a bunch of other libraries that we can use. We can use like a word cloud one. We can use Seaborn, we can use NLTK, we can use Spacey. Those are all other like data science libraries. Here's where we connect to the Google Drive, and then here is where we read the CSV. So right off the bat, once we print the CSV as a data frame, this is what we see. So what does everybody see over here? Can somebody describe what they're looking at? There's no wrong answers here. I'm going to just take a stab at it. You can't describe what you're looking at? Yeah. Good.
You're looking at like usernames and then when the tweets were posted at what time and kind of like where it was coming from as well, like what type of phone. I'm not sure about the tweet ID though.
Yeah, what is the tweet ID? So the tweet ID is that every tweet has a specific sort of number associated with it. And what you could do is you could take that tweet ID and you can use that to look up more data about it. You could also try to extract the URL from it. So a tweet usually has it's probably like t.co / like something in between / username / a number. And that number is likely to be the tweet ID. Okay? So again, it's like, this is just gobbledygook. Like, what are we looking at here? So what we want to do is, the first thing that we typically do with exploratory data analysis, which is kind of just take a look, you open the fridge, looking around, see what's in there, right? And so we're going to do something called a shape function. And so we're going to just take a look at the data. So it's given us two numbers, 100 and 12. So 100, comma 12. So what is that referring to? Any thoughts about that? What could that be when you look? It's looking at the CSV and it's giving you two numbers, 100 and 12. What could that be? 100 tweets? Yeah, and then what is the 12 referencing? Go ahead.
Yeah, maybe for like every 100 tweets, there are like 12 retweets or like 12 interactions with hashtag interfaith.
Okay, so it could be retweets. Okay, any other guesses? All right, so these are the rows and the columns. So it's telling us that there's 100 rows and there's 12 columns. And that's useful because if you're looking at data, you kind of want to get a sense of how large it is. So this is a pretty small data set. It's like not that large. We wouldn't consider this a big data set, okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to do .info. We're going to learn a little bit more about the types of data. So what we see here is that there's the first one is where in the column order it is. So it's what you call like an index typically. So it says number, and it starts with 0. So that's how lists are usually in Python. They start with 0, so it doesn't start with 1, and then it keeps counting, right? And the first one is not named, and it doesn't seem like there's any data inside of it, and it's got a data type of integer. And then we have like no column names are here. It's telling us that some of this stuff is blank or not blank. And then it's telling us everything else is a string. And that's a bit problematic because if you want to look at the favorite count, we want to sort our tweets, we can't have it as a string. It's got to be sortable, it's got to be an integer. So that tells us that this data set is a little bit dirty. And when you do data science, a lot of what you spend time doing is just cleaning up your data, pre-processing it to make it useful for this analysis. So you might have to change the type of data that's in there. You might have to get rid of some of the data. You might have to fill in some blanks. That's all part of this process. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the column names. And the column names are 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's messed up, right? That's not good. We don't want to have 2 zeros. That doesn't make any sense. So we're going to make a list of column names. And in Python, what we do is we just create the name. You have a variable equals, and then you use a bracket. And then for each column, you just put those in quotes, and then you close the column. 90% of your bugs are going to be because you forget to close a bracket or you put a comma in the wrong place. And you might think you're really advanced, and you'll get humbled by that. That's the kind of stuff that happens with a bug. What we want to do here is make sure the column names are matching the number of columns that are in the data set. If they don't match, you're going to get an error. What's good about errors is it usually tells you what line of code the error is in. It'll say, oh, it's in line 56 or whatever, and so that's very helpful to look at that. So I added a little bit of a space in the front because the number of columns, the first column is actually blank, and so we just create a blank column name and run it, all right? And so what we do over here is we clean up the data a little bit more, and we're going to convert those columns that should be numbers, but they're alphabetical characters. We're going to convert those into numbers, and this is how we do it. I'm going to kind of skip over this a little bit, but we've cleaned it up now, and now you can see over here that our tweet ID is now an integer, and our favorite and our retweet counts are also integers, and everything else is an object, and we're cool with that. And the geo and the coordinates probably geo should be an object. Coordinates probably are going to be an object as well. And we'll go through there. So now that we've done that, we've got, we're going to do what's looking at heads and tails. What do y'all think heads and tails refers to when you're looking at a data set? Any guesses for that one? So heads, what it does is it lets you look at the first 5 rows, and tails lets you look at the last 5 rows. And so this is what it's given us. So now you can see it's a little bit cleaner and easier to read. And but we can't really see the tweet, and you can't really expand the column, which is kind of annoying. You're like, all right, great. I want to read the tweet. That's the main part of this, and I can't even look at it. So there's a little button over here. I call it the magic button. I actually don't know what the name of the button is, but it converts it into an interactive table. So you click on that, and now what I could see here is I can see the tweet. So what is the first tweet about? When was it made? Good? Great, yeah. So it was made August 13th. At what time was it made? Yeah, you're right. 12:46 a.m. Right. So I did this late last night, but my laptop is tied to Eastern Standard Time, And so I think it was probably like 11 something, but that's very interesting, right? So that's the most recent tweet is basically at 8:13, and then you can see the other ones are a little bit before then. So that's where it pulled the data from. And who's the user? Can you guys see it? Is it too small or? Yeah. Let's make it bigger. How's that? Is that a little bit better?
Need a bigger monitor.
Yeah, I need a bigger monitor. Yeah. So it was 8:13, and it's this guy, Dean Hedges, 3. And what was his tweet? You want to say what it is? Yeah.
Yeah.
You're all the way in the front, so you can see better. So.
It's just talking about how they're extending their deadline to the 2022 to 2023 DC Fellowship to August 22nd.
Great. So this is an opportunity now, right? So your job you've been tasked with is find opportunities for your Interfaith Inc. What is this? It's a fellowship for an interfaith organization called Abrahamic Houses, right? Which I've never heard of, but it seems kind of interesting. And they've extended the deadline. So maybe your organization has college students or high school students or graduate students that are looking for opportunities like this. So here's a potential opportunity. Right off the bat, the first tweet that we see is here. And this is like real data. Like I didn't modify it. There's some things that I did clean out, but this is not one of them. This is basically like the actual tweet that you're seeing. We could see here that they did it via Android, right? And I'm just going to zoom out a little bit more. But how many favorites did Dean get for his tweet? 0. Sad face. All right. Sorry, Dean. How many retweets did he get? 1, right? So he got 1 retweet. We don't have any information about his coordinates. The language is in English. And then there's a bunch of other hashtags. So Dean's fighting the good fight. He's trying to get people to get this interfaith fellowship. And he's retweeted Abrahamic Houses. And he got only 1 retweet. What's the second tweet? It's the same tweet. So Dean actually retweeted Abrahamic Houses. So that was at 8:12 at 11:50, and then Dean responded, roughly like almost an hour later and retweeted it. How many favorites did the Abrahamic Houses get? 2. Yeah, not a lot of love. But they got 1 retweet. And who was that retweet? Dean. Yeah, so Dean here. So this is another opportunity here, right? So as an interfaith leader, you found this opportunity. You find another organization that's doing good content. Send them some love. Retweet their content. Help spread their message and find other opportunities as well, right? So you can kind of see down here that there's more tweets. There's another one about today is International Youth Day. And it talks about this program in the UK. So I did not know about that event, International Youth Day, and I use a hashtag. So the third opportunity now is, so 1 opportunity is you have a potential fellowship. 2, you can help support other interfaith leaders by retweeting their content. 3, there's an event called International Youth Day that's focused on interfaith. I did not know about that event, right? So now we've learned, just in the first 3 tweets, we got 3 potential opportunities. This could be part of your content strategy. Your organization can do an event for International Youth Day. You can also use the hashtag as you're creating content. So that's how you're developing little by little this sort of like digital strategy just by looking at the first 3 tweets. What's the 4th tweet? It says, wait, all cats are Muslim? Gawker says so. So it's true, right? So this is the internet. So there's always going to be stuff about cats. Has nothing, maybe there's some substance there, but that's just how it is. And so you get some more information out there, right? So you could do that. All right. And then we're going to do the tail. Now we're going to look at the last 5 tweets. And what this is going to show is that there's some tweets from, it looks like the Ahmadiyya Muslim Women's Association of Toronto chapter is having an annual Interfaith Symposium. So now here's an interfaith event that you could potentially go to and learn about. And then there's one here. It says Buddhism, Interfaith, Peace Day, Peace, Nature, Dolphins, Oceans, Marine Life. This is just, it seems like this is a Buddhist Twitter account, and they're just promoting some positive content. And so there might be some opportunities for you to retweet them as well. And then there's a Berlin Interfaith Festival organized by Faith in Tunes on August 28th. So again, you're starting to see now like events are happening, there's content being produced, they're all using these kind of hashtags. And this one got about 18 retweets. And so those are the kind of things you'll start noticing as you're looking at it. So what we're going to do now is we're seeing some retweets in here, and we want to clean it up. And so we're going to look at the unique values in each one. And so when you look at the tweets, out of the 100, 82 are unique, which means that most of these are not retweets. They're actually original tweets. And And so when I first did this project, it was actually the opposite. There was 93 retweets and only like 7 or so like original tweets. So I had to clean it up a little bit to do that. But this is an example of what you can do to do that. Then you can drop the duplicates, and you can see all the tweets that are unique. And then what we want to do is sort by the values now. So remember, we spent a little bit of time cleaning up the data. It was a string, and now we made it an integer. Now we can do this thing called sorting, and we can look at the tweets and the retweets, or favorites and retweets. So this was the one that got the most retweets. It's the one about delighted to attend the Berlin Interfaith Festival, right? And it's for Hadi Khuram, and we have a little bit of information about him. And then after that, it was participants wanted. I'm working on an interfaith, intercultural couples project, and they're looking to talk to couples, right? So that's another opportunity again. So somebody's doing research about interfaith couples. Again, if your members are interested in that kind of stuff, you can kind of promote that. And again, some more stuff about the event. And we have some RTs that are in there, and International Day, right? So this just, as you're looking at it, it's like 100 tweets, and just looking at just the first few rows, the last 5 rows, we've already learned a lot about what we could do here, all right? Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna get a little bit away from text analysis, and we're gonna look at a bit more visualization. And so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna install another library called Advert Tools, which is actually not for Twitter. It's for, it's not even like really data science. It's for search engine marketing. This company built this library. It's actually really good. And so I use it over here. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to extract the hashtags out of it and see if I can visualize what that looks like. So what I'm gonna do first is look at the, basically break up the hashtags into different types of analysis. So the number of hashtags, the frequency, the top hashtags. So here's the hashtag summary. You'll see that the average hashtag per post is 4.44, which is very interesting, right? And I did this project where I'm looking at a hashtag called Love Jihad in India. And so Love Jihad is like a conspiracy theory that was being fomented by some right-wing groups that are basically spreading the idea that Muslims are secretly converting like Hindu women to Islam to marry them. And it's part of this like stealth way of increasing their numbers, and it's like this crazy conspiracy theory. And there's an organization that's doing fact checking. And so I analyzed the tweets of the people that are spreading Love Jihad and the people that are fact checking it. And right off the bat, what I noticed was that the people that were doing the Love Jihad conspiracy theory, they were using a lot of hashtags. They're using like 4 to 6 hashtags. The fact checking organization didn't use hashtags at all. So right off the bat, looking at the data, you're like, oh, that's interesting. And one recommendation we would give the organization is you need to use more hashtags, because what it does is it shows up in more people's feeds, because Twitter has all your data and they look at what type of things you're looking at, and they'll start recommending hashtags to you. You can also follow hashtags. And so that's an example of like how to amplify your message on Twitter. That's the kind of stuff that you want to see. So 4 hashtags on average, and most of us probably when we tweet, we use like 1 hashtag, maybe 2. But if we want to get more effective, we might want to think about using more hashtags, right? And then we're gonna try to flatten the hashtag a little bit, right? And start counting the hashtags. And now we can put those together to look at the top hashtags and see how many times they were mentioned. So interfaith is there, but this is a lot of text, and it's late, my eyes are hurting, so I don't wanna look at all this text. Let's just go and visualize it now. And now we're switching over to something called Matplotlib, which is a visualization tool. And I can see the top hashtag. So it says hashtag interfaith. That's obviously the one we should see, because that's the data set is pulling from that hashtag. And then we're gonna see hashtag Islam, hashtag blessing, grateful, gratitude, love, intrafaith, amore, art code, and you get the sense of like all the hashtags. There's International Youth Day, so not too many hashtags about that as well. Next, what we're gonna do is we're gonna try and look at the mentions. So hashtags is one thing. Now we're gonna look at wherever the @ symbol is used, and we're gonna see who are the top people that were mentioned. So we have Lodge Canada, Twig Swindon, Voice of Islam, some interfaith ones, and you can get a sense of like who are the players here. And I kind of messed up this visualization. I made it way too big. I can actually customize it and make the bars a little bit larger to do that. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna do what's called, we're gonna look at all the text. So we looked at the hashtags, we looked at the mentions, look at the actual text in the tweets. What we need to do is we need to get rid of our hashtags, get rid of our mentions, and get rid of what's called RT. Because what you could do in Twitter is you can do like, I can tweet something, and then somebody can quote tweet that, and then somebody can retweet my quote tweet, and then somebody can favorite that. So you have like a tweet within a tweet within a tweet, so that RT ends up being all over the data. And so what you want to do is you want to drop that a little bit and get rid of that data and clean it up a little bit. All right. So I'm cleaning this up, and then what you're going to do here is we're going to remove punctuation and regular expressions. So the word like at, the, and, conjunctions, like all that stuff is like, call it filler words. We're going to get rid of those. And then we're going to go even a step further, and we're going to cut the words and look at what's called the stem or the root of the word. So for example, the word grateful, it could be gratefully or grateful, or I don't know, maybe like gratitude or something. But what it's going to do is it's going to cut all those different permutations of the endings. So what you can see right here is really like what's up there. So there's over here, you can see there's Rabbi E. Sherman. These are some user names, so people are probably mentioning other users as well. And again, this is like really hard on my eyes. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to visualize it. And so here we see the top keyword, not the top hashtag, not the top user, but the keyword is interfaith, and then the word Muslim. And the reason why there's a lot of Muslim-y stuff, there was a shooting in like Albuquerque. There was also, some other stuff that was happening. It's Muharram, which is an Islamic month, and there's a day called Ashura, so there's a lot of tweets about that around it. Then the word grateful is there. That's kind of interesting. So one of the common themes amongst a lot of interfaith work is the word concept of gratitude. And so if you're thinking about organizing an event, like how do I bring all these people together? Let's talk about gratitude in all these different religions. That might be a topic. And then join is there. It's because people are having events. So it's like join our event or join our webinar or whatever. And then the concept of love and participation, gratitude, intrafaith. Intrafaith is important because what happened with the Albuquerque shooting is the victims were Shia, and the perpetrator was Sunni. And so there's a lot of people that are saying, oh, we need to do intra-faith within our community, within the Muslim community, and talk about that. Cool. And then last but not least, we're gonna look at analyzing what's called an organization. So this is where we start getting away from exploratory data analysis into like more machine learning. And what we're using a library called Spacey. And what that does is it does something called NER, name entity recognition. So what it does is it has like this gigantic library, and it'll look at text and say, hey, John Doe is not just a random word, it's the name of a person. And maybe it'll say the White House is a building, it's an entity. And so it starts analyzing the text of the words and starts classifying it and different things. So here what we do is we're looking at an entity. And so it's recognized that the organization that's mentioned from all these tweets is the Ahmadiyya Muslim Women's Association, because they're doing that event in Canada, I think is what we saw. And so you see there's the Swin Interfaith. It classified Islam and Sikh as entities. So it's not necessarily like a 501c3 organization. It just shows that it's like a group of people. So Islam as a religion, Sikhism as a religion, and you can see there's something called Roundhouse. There's something called Twig Swindon, which is a user handle, the Diocese of St. David's. And then you can see here it says RT, and it classified that as an entity. So it's not that great. These are algorithms, and so you might need to go back and train it. But you can kind of see here that there's all these different institutions that are there. The Confluence Sun Center of St. Louis. So now you're learning like who's tweeting interfaith. You might be like, oh, that's in my backyard. I didn't know they're having an interfaith event. And again, it's another kind of opportunity that we have over there. And then we do a person analysis. So classified Muharram as a person. It's not. It's Islamic calendar. It's a month. Then you see Shirley Murphy, and then you see Mahatma Gandhi, Zenda Delanis. There's a reverend mentioned here. And so again, it's not too clean in terms of separating a name versus an entity, but you can kind of see that information there. And the last thing that we'll look at is basically source. And so we're going to go back to matplotlib and look at the source here. This is where it gets kind of interesting. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So what do we know about the sources? What are people using to tweet? You see phone. Sorry, say it again. Yeah, you see web app is one, yeah, and then Android, iPhone, and iPad. What's after that? What's Hootsuite? Yeah, great. Yeah, it's like a social media manager tool. It allows you to schedule tweets. So, and that's what Buffer is too. So you see that people are using the apps, the Twitter app directly, or they're using a scheduling tool to send out their tweets, which is nice. You don't have to be up at 11:30, p.m. or whatever tweeting. You can just write it in the morning, get a cup of coffee, and just schedule all your tweets for the day. And then we see something here called Social Pilot, which is similar. And then we see this thing called Mindfulness Meditation Retweeter. What's that? Exactly. It's our first bot, right? So somebody created a bot called Mindfulness Meditation Retweeter. What's it doing? Anytime somebody's talking about mindfulness or meditation, it retweets it, right? So this is an example of where other organizations or other like religious actors that might be using it for nefarious purposes, like ISIS, they had a bot that they were sending out 200,000 tweets a day. And they didn't have 200,000 people tweeting. What they did is they had a couple of thousand people, but they had a bot that would retweet all of their members' tweets, right? So this is an example of how some of the ways that bad guys are using Twitter. Over here, I'm actually kind of surprised. There's not that many bots over here. There's only like one or two. If you go to something like, let's say like Bitcoin, like hashtag Bitcoin, you're going to see tons of bots. You know, you don't even know it's real. And this is actually the heart of the lawsuit that Elon Musk is having with Twitter about who's real, who's fake on Twitter. And what Twitter does is it actually shows you where they tweeted from. You can also get around this by doing it outside the Twitter developer API. You can probably create, you know, a script that does this as well. It's a little bit harder to do that. But you can see right here, we got our first bot. And so that's an opportunity for you as well, is that if you find yourself retweeting stuff all the time, you're like, man, this is tiresome. You can create a bot that does that. And the Twitter developer account, you can actually create your bot there. And basically, like you'll get, you know, like a token, what's called like a consumer token and access token. And you can essentially, it allows you to basically, you know, write up you can not only read tweets, you can also write tweets. You can also do retweets. And so if it sees a hashtag or a person, it'll automatically retweet it. So that's probably what's happening here. And what's great is these are very nice people. They told you exactly what it's for. It's a retweeter account. It's for mindfulness meditation. These are good guys, okay? As far as we know, right? Then we have Instagram, and then we have IFTTT, which is if this, then that. It's a tool that lets you to do pretty much anything. There's tools that are out there like Zapier and IFTTT, which let you basically, if something happens, it does something, it triggers some code. And then we have the word source, and that's a bit problematic. What that means is it's taking the column heading, which is called source, and it's treating it, it's counting it in here. So our data is still a little bit dirty. We didn't clean it up 100%. What we'd want to do is probably drop that row with all the column headings so that this way the data is a bit more cleaned up. And then it says Agora Pulse app, which sounds kind of interesting. I don't know what that app is about. Sprout Social is another scheduling tool. There's Deliver IT, which is another scheduling tool. And then there's something called Spiritual Journey, which I thought was interesting. It's not an app. I searched it in the Apple Store, the Play Store. So most likely this is also a Twitter bot, and it's called Spiritual Journey. And so somebody's out there building some retweeters that are useful to do that, okay? So that's kind of a quick 0 to 1 overview. I know that's a lot to take in. When I first started learning data science, I'm taking a class with MIT for this stuff, and we have these Jupyter notebooks. And it took me like a whole week or just to install everything. It was really frustrating, and I was just like, oh, this is terrible. But all the TAs don't use Jupyter notebooks; they use Google Colab, and I was like, this is much easier. So what I've done here is, like I said, the notebook is available and the CSV is available. And what I'd recommend that you do is you just play around with it and you just tinker and try to do your own analyses and learn. And a lot of what you're going to do is you're going to be on Stack Overflow, like Googling like this bug. You're going to get an error, and you're going to find a really good answer sometimes in Stack Overflow. You're going to go on YouTube. So it's just a matter of trying and trial and error. And what I have at home is I have a little whiteboard. And what I try is if I'm trying to do something, I say, this is what I'm trying to do. Here's attempt number 1. Here's how it worked, and it failed. Here's attempt number 2. It's kind of like that game Chutes and Ladders. Have you ever played that game where it's like you get all the way to the top and you're about to get it to work, and then all of a sudden you make a mistake and it's like not what you wanted to do, right? And so that's what happens over here. Is that you're going to try things out. You're going to go up down one path. It's going to end up being a cul-de-sac. You have to go right back where you started. So doing like a tree map of how you're learning is very helpful. Learning how to learn, if you do that, it'll be very easy. And you'll start seeing that certain platforms and websites are much more helpful at learning. Like Stack Overflow is great, but it's also like some of the stuff could be out of date. So for example, the Twitter API just got updated at the beginning of this year. And so all these other Twitter scrapers are now obsolete. They don't work anymore, right? And the only one that Twitter works with is Tweepy. And the problem with Tweepy is like they kind of upgraded it to the new API, but a lot of it still like doesn't 100% work with it. And so you're looking at these Stack Overflow questions from like 2016, they're already obsolete. So that's what's going to happen is going on YouTube, you'll see more recent videos. You'll start noticing like, oh, let me look at anything from 2022. So learning how to learn is a huge part of this. The goal is like, you got to start somewhere. And if you can just get up a Google Colab account with Gmail, you can read a CSV, you can install some libraries, and then you could spend the rest of the year learning little snippets of how to analyze the data, and you can go from there. Cool? So it's 12 o'clock. I'll open it up to questions. And just to kind of tie everything up, we found that There's lots of events that are happening that we might want to connect to. There's fellowship opportunities, there's research opportunities, there's hashtags, there's events. And we only looked at a handful of tweets. There's like 100 tweets. Last night when I came into the hotel, I was like, let me just run it. It's not like, this is only a week's, like not even a week. It's maybe like a couple of days worth of data that we're looking at. We found lots of rich opportunities for our organization. So imagine if you looked at 1,000 tweets, imagine if you looked at 100,000 tweets, you would get even more interesting ideas for your organization and develop these content strategies that are out there. So you know now that if you're going to tweet, at least 4 hashtags, right? If you're going to see organizations, you're going to give them love because they're not getting a lot of love on Twitter. So you have some solidarity with other interfaith organizations. There's stuff happening locally, happening internationally. So those are all things that we found out just by looking at the stuff. That's just kind of like a drop in the bucket. And so just keep trying and trying. And my information's available. If people have questions, I'd be happy to sit down and do mentorship sessions over Zoom if you get stuck anywhere to try to get stuff done. Cool? Any questions? Yep, go ahead.
Thank you for this presentation, first of all. So after you do all this work, your analysis is all done, can you tell us an example of how you're measuring the impact so that we actually know whether or not data science is being used for good?
Yeah, so the example I'll give is that when I was looking at my ISIS data set, there was like a network analysis that we did, and there's a specific individual who was like the central node, right? So the way that Twitter would work was they would basically, they would only take an account down if somebody reported it. And so what happened was these guys would get an account down, they would create a new one, and they would just keep recreating accounts. But there's this one guy who's always there, and he called himself a reporter, and he pretended he was like a journalist, but he was kind of like, like the Truth Social of ISIS, basically. Like he only tweeted pro-ISIS content, and he was calling it news reports. And so it was like an obvious network node that you could just like cut, basically. So that's an example of like when it looks at how bad faith actors are acting, you can have that kind of impact where you can start seeing like, okay, cool, these are individuals that are influences of the network. And also you can use that to develop your own strategy. A lot of, if you want to get retweeted, you can comment on that person's tweets who's a big influencer in the network and get your message out there as well. So you can start mapping out like a distribution strategy to do that. And Twitter is an amazing tool for connecting with people, even professionally. If you're just trying to like get a job and if you're active on Twitter, there's just so many tight-knit networks. I think it's a better networking tool than LinkedIn. You just find a lot more interesting people. The conversations are more natural. They're a little less self-promotional. And so you can find some really, really cool ways to do stuff. Great. All right, any other questions? All right, I think that's it. I'll be up here if anybody wants to chat. Have a great conference. Hope you guys enjoy everything. All right, bye.